Hello all, I'm Kel Kidman, welcome to Breaking on the Daily, and today our stories are Joe Biden campaigns in Georgia to minimal crowds, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says restaurants to remain open amid COVID-19, and the FDA reviews Moderna coronavirus vaccine, saying it's highly effective. All that and more. And let's begin with the Joe Biden story. Yeah, he campaigned in Georgia talking about how he needs to win control of the Senate. And, man, yeah, this is the guy who won $80 million. They couldn't even fill out freaking park. There's no one there. 50 people, including his staff and reporters. He's just kind of standing around. No one showed up for his campaign in Georgia. And, you know, people are saying, oh, I'm super worried about the Georgia runoffs. And in my opinion, I'm not worried. And, you know, I have good reason why. Because there have been a lot of things that he's been saying over the past few weeks that I think have really limited Joe Biden's support among the far left. And I don't think they'll come to vote for him like they did back in November, even if you are to assume that they did vote for him back in November enough to actually give him the win. And it really, really is clear, even from this very speech. He talks so much about how all of these things, and to juxtapose some of what his rhetoric is in comparison to his actual administration, it's pretty clear that he isn't actually appealing to very many leftists, especially not at this point. I don't think that a lot of the leftists will be coming into support for Georgia, though of course I'm not leaving it out of the question that that the Georgia seats could flip. Of course they could, I just don't think they will, even with all of the talk, because I think a lot of it really is just talk that isn't going to affect the actual outcome of the election. But the sort of schism I talked about yesterday with regard to Joe Biden's image among either conservatives or the far left of his party have really, really put themselves out in the open, with AOC saying Pelosi and Schumer need to go, but warning of a Democratic power vacuum in the interim. Now, this is an interesting story. Reason being is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Squad and all those sorts of people have been the sort of rising stars in the Democratic Party ever since 2018. But they haven't had all that much power within the party, at least not yet. It's kind of interesting to see where all of this is going, and I do wonder if the far left of the Democrats will completely take over the party rather than just the sort of more corporatist swaying in the wind mono-party part of their party. Strange prose there. But anyway, I do wonder if that part of the party will simply be able to take back control, or whether they will actually fall to to AOC and the like. Because if they do, well, I think the Democratic Party will be destroyed regardless, because AOC is not popular, especially not outside of New York or her Twitter echo chamber. It's quite interesting, though, to see Ocasio-Cortez make explicit moves to that effect. Because though they have signaled that they wish to primary particular Democrats and all that sort of thing over the years and over all of the time they've been in office, you haven't seen the sort of direct call-outs from AOC until after this particular election. And I do expect this to intensify over the next 2 years. I wouldn't even, considering how small the the Democratic House majority is, I wouldn't be surprised if they can actually get a lot of things through because of the far left of their party rather than because of Republicans. Because imagine a world in which Pelosi puts up a police reform bill, but it doesn't go far enough for people like the AOCs and Ilhan Omars of the world, and they're unwilling to compromise. In that case, they could sway enough of the party to completely stonewall all of the Democrats' designs without Republicans being involved in the first place, on top of ruining their electoral prospects in 2022 at the same time. I'm not quite so dire as some others are with regard to the fate of both of the current political parties. Frankly, I believe that they are quite durable organizations, mostly because of their ability to change when the political whim suits it. there have been plenty of examples of this over time, and of course, you see the most egregious one being the Democrats going from the party of the KKK to the party of the Black Panthers, and it is quite literally flipped entirely. Of course, the Republicans have remained more consistent over time. People talk about how there was a flip in the parties, but really there wasn't. The fact of the matter is that the Democrats simply change much more often than the Republicans ever did. The Republicans have a much more consistent platform over time, and their platform right now looks fairly similar to their platform back in, I'd say, the Eisenhower days, or before that even, I would say Lincoln is very similar to a lot of the Republican Party as it is currently. Whereas if you compare the Democrats over the same time period, well, they changed drastically over time, and have gone from being parties of the working class, a party of white nationalists, party of black nationalists. They've been all sorts of things over time, whereas the Republicans, again, are very much more consistent. And so but we are at a turning point. Even if I don't think that these parties will fall in the next few years, though it is, of course, a possibility, and, you could see a scenario in which they fall off entirely. I do think the parties will change over the next few years. Republicans less so, because, as I've said, Republicans are simply less likely to do that. But the Democrats are likely to change entirely, and I wouldn't be surprised if you get a similar phenomena as to what happened in Britain with the Labour Party, where the Labour Party went from being a working-class sort of unionist party into a more communistic form under Corbyn. And I wouldn't be surprised if you get a similar thing with the Democrats, because though we have seen certain rising stars occur with coinciding with the sort of Corbyn effect that happened in Britain, Bernie Sanders being the most prominent of which, we have not seen the full shift of the party into that realm. But I do expect it to happen at some point. We might just simply be a few years behind where Britain is currently. What would be interesting to see in respect to that is how the Republicans respond. Because I would hope, and though I do not expect, that the Republicans should become more strong in their positions, strong in the position of limited governance, constitutionalism, that sort of thing. But I don't exactly expect it to happen, simply because the Republicans do not have a history of being extremely strong in their positions, and rather seem to be moving along with the tide, simply at a slower pace to the Democrats. It has been said many times that the Republicans are simply the Democrats going the speed limit. And I tend to agree with such propositions, as it seems eminently obvious to most everyone that is absolutely the case. And, what better evidence is there than that McConnell and Pelosi are now expressing optimism that the COVID-19 relief deal is near. Now, remember, for those of you who remember, the COVID-19 relief deal has become a political football over the past few months, with Nancy Pelosi absolutely refusing to pass it without major concessions from the Republicans, even more than they already do, with regard to things like bailing out particular cities or states that were already in dire straits before the pandemic, or other such things like over 100% coverage of people's paychecks, and thus incentivizing people to not actually work and rather stay at home for the rest of their lives. And some of them have even suggested that it be permanent, if I remember correctly. But it is interesting to see this happen after all of the sort of election stuff has kind of calmed down. Now, I'm not saying that it's completely over, because it isn't. It isn't really over until January 6th. And it never was, for the record. A lot of people saying, oh, you were talking about December 9th and then December 14th. And no, most people on the right were talking about January 6th the entire time. But whatever, it's just a straw man. But it is interesting to see this, especially after the comments from McConnell about how he doesn't want people supporting Donald Trump in his pursuits over this election. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. I do think it's really just more evidence of the monoparty, because this is a ridiculous $1.4 trillion bill. I mean, it is just a ridiculous amount of spending. If the Congress wanted to make itself useful, really what they should do is, rather than a stimulus package, they should just say to the governors, open up your economy, or you're getting nothing, or you're getting no public money. That should be really the plan. I mean, why is it that we're still paying all of these politicians, all of these state governments, all this money to not let people be free? All right, especially when their restrictions have been overwhelmingly knocked down in the courts. Why? Why is that the case? And I'm not talking about being knocked down in the courts as in they're dismissed outright. No, I'm talking about knocked down in the courts as in we go to the merits and we actually, adjudicate the case rather than throwing it out on onerous nonsense like standing, which is what the whole election fraud thing has been this entire time. And man, it really boils my bones to see how all of these allegations have been treated in the courts, because really it has been just a procession of absolute cowardice on the part of the courts. But as to not getting off into the reads, we're going to move on from that section of our into the COVID section, and this begins with our headline story of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Restaurants are now to remain open amid COVID-19. This is a really, really good thing. And I'm glad that he is really sticking to his guns, because Florida, I think we can call it a red state at this point. It is very clearly becoming a red state, if not entirely a red state. Ohio, definitely. I mean, geez, 8 points. If you want any evidence that the pollsters were completely wrong, Ohio. Ohio was ridiculously wrong. They were saying it's a battleground state. Oh, Biden probably will win and that sort of thing all before the election. And then Trump wins it by 8 points. And then suddenly they have all this revision. And no, we weren't that far off. Really, they were. I mean, Ohio was trending red for a long time there. Not 8 points red, but it was trending red. And Florida, it's good to see Ron DeSantis actually stand up for the position he took earlier in the year. Because really, the restrictions on COVID on businesses and on personal freedom because of COVID-19 have been completely ridiculous and completely onerous over all of this time. It's truly unreasonable to see all of these states and all of these cities say, well, you can't go out and be free because I'm scared of a cough. Really, it truly is amazing that has become the norm. They aren't interested in any of the actual statistics. They're not interested in anything that would give you a nuanced perspective on what what COVID-19 really means. All they're interested in is fear-mongering, and it has truly become ridiculous. And even into the vaccine, you've seen completely ridiculous things. And on to our next, another headline story. The FDA has reviewed Moderna's coronavirus vaccine is highly effective. And now, it's interesting, because as far as I've seen thus far, there haven't been any significant side effects to the Moderna vaccine that there have been to the Pfizer vaccine that we've seen. I don't know if that will hold out long term, as we haven't seen really anyone use it. The FDA, I think, is going to be the first country to actually approve the Moderna vaccine, and it will be quite interesting to see where that goes. And I don't expect it to be symptomless, because I don't believe vaccines are magic, because they aren't. It gets so silly. It's so silly, because I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not someone who sits around saying, these vaccines are going to give you autism without evidence. I'm not someone who's like that. But I'm also not someone sitting around saying vaccines are magic and they don't produce any side effects, because that's eminently not true. Certain vaccines do not present major side effects or even substantial side effects. But some vaccines do. People who are saying, if you question whether there's side effects to the Pfizer vaccine, and the side effects that they readily admit exist, the side effects that they warn you against when taking it, then you're an anti-vaxxer. Because that's not true. You're not an anti-vaxxer if you say the Pfizer vaccine has side effects, because Pfizer accepts that the Pfizer vaccine has side effects. And vaccines are not magic, as I've stated. they have side effects. Some of them do. Some of them substantial. Some of them entirely, catastrophic. That can happen. Because it turns out that vaccines are not magic. They require rigorous testing, rigorous research in order to bring out. And though I appreciate entirely what Trump has done with the vaccine, with Project Warp Speed and all that, all the financial incentives he's given, yes, including to Pfizer, because even if they did not get money during the development of the vaccine, they were certainly incentivized by the sort of payback they were going to get after they finished it. It's fairly common for someone to incentivize someone with money after the fact. Let me ask you this, to bring this into perspective. If you, as a worker for some job, whatever job you're doing at the moment, aren't you getting paid as you're doing the job? A lot of the time, no. If you're a contract worker, for instance, if you write for contract work, or you do an Uber, you get paid while you're working. Sometimes you get paid before, but sometimes you don't get paid until after you've already produced the results. And this is the case with the Pfizer issue. That's exactly what happened with Project Warp Speed. So anyone who's claiming that Project Warp Speed had nothing to do with the Pfizer vaccine, they're just lying to you. It's just that they didn't get paid during the development of such. Which, by the way, I would consider to be a better model, because people are generally are much more apt to actually complete things if they only get get the thing they were expecting after they've completed it. So I'm sure that contributed a lot. It just shows a complete lack of understanding of economics from a lot of these people who are claiming that sort of thing. And Moderna is more, I think, heavily involved in Project Warp Speed than Pfizer was. I think they were getting paid, concurrently as it was going on. But yeah, this seems interesting, and they're expected to be starting, actually releasing the vaccine just this week. And it is encouraging, of course. I am, as I have stated, once the vaccine is readily available, and I'm just not going to listen to any more COVID restrictions, period. I'm not going to wear a mask, pretty much in any circumstance. I'm not going to social distance at all. I really don't anyway, but even less than I currently do. I guess. That might get a little weird, but I'm sorry in advance, I guess. But we'll have to see where that goes. Now, on to our last story, and this one is annoying to me. Because though this is a study which is ostensibly advantageous to my position, to give you the headline, wearing a used mask could be worse than no mask amid COVID-19 study. Now, I have a lot of problems with this study. First of all, it's a computer model, so it's not a study. You might as well open up Breath of the Wild. You might as well open up some video game. You might as well open up, to be more topical, Cyberpunk 2077, and study freaking vaccine transmission there for all the good it will do you. Because here's the fact of the matter. Computers are not real life. And I don't know why I have to explain this, or why so many scientists seem to completely not understand this. But computers do not accurately represent real life, especially when they're created by humans. And this is a study created by humans. And it's evident through the prose that all of this is completely nonsensical and relies on faulty premises, this study. Because this study supposes that a new 3-layer surgical mask is 65% efficient in filtering particles in the air. Now, did any of you notice what the problem with that sentence was? I'll give you a hint. It was the filtering. Because here's the fact of the matter. A mask is not a filter. You might as well. For all of you out there who are saying, no, it is a filter. When I breathe through it, it goes through it. Wearing a mask and trying to use a mask as a filter is the equivalent of taking a water filter or some kind of bottled water filter, taking that off, opening it up, throwing it into the river without the actual bottle in it, and expecting that to clean the river water. Because it ain't gonna do that. Because what a filter requires in order to be a filter at all, or do anything, is some sort of seal that prevents what it's trying to filter from going in any other way. Now, let me ask, for anyone who has worn a mask in their lifetime, does a mask do that? The answer, of course, is no. You can feel it. Even if you're using one of the masks with the sort of sealing mechanisms, which does help maybe a little bit, there are still air pockets on the sides of the mask and at the top where generally it's going to blow directly into your eyes. Everyone knows that. Anyone who wears glasses especially knows that because it fogs up their glasses every 5 seconds. Not to mention on the bottom, it's not an airtight seal, all right? So saying it will filter 65% of particles is silly because the particles aren't going through the mask. Because it's not acting as a filter. It just isn't. It's acting as a blockage. Sure, it's not going to go directly into your mouth, but it's going to come from some other area. It's just such a stupid thing. And it's especially silly to see people with sort of like the one-ply stuff use it. It's even less effective. But to move on to like more of the headline stuff, it shows that, as it goes down, it goes down to 25%. Now, of course, this is all being shown through a computer, which is to say, not from real life, so you can't trust any of these numbers as being accurate, because they aren't. Computer models are fake studies. Computer models are fake science. It's all pseudoscientific nonsense. And anyone who tells you, look at this computer model study for my evidence of my position, you shouldn't take them seriously because they're not being honest to you. Or at least they are severely incompetent and severely misinformed on what a computer is. Oh my gosh. And that has been one of the most annoying things over this year because maybe not most, but a plurality of the pro-mask studies that have come out this year, which by the way are the only pro-mask studies to ever come out. Other than, I think there was one in 1918, during when there was another surge of panic and ridiculous response with California mandating masks, and so they needed the requisite statistics to justify their position retroactively. But anything in the intervening years, from about 1920 to 2020, in the 100 years from 1920 to 2019, there's been pretty much no pro-mask studies, almost none in terms of a mask in a public area, as a public policy for preventing disease spread. It's never been done. I've yet to see one. Maybe it exists. I have yet to see one. A lot of most of this, if not all of it, comes from this year, from studies freaking started this year, and a lot of them, I would say, probably around 40% of the ones I've seen are computer models, are people writing code to show what they want and bungle the statistics to make it look scientific when it really isn't. And keep that in mind. If you see the words model in a scientific study, it is not a scientific study, all right? Discard it entirely. It's worthless. It doesn't mean anything. That's it. And that's where I'm going to leave you today with those words of wisdom. Because this has been Breaking on the Daily. I'm Cal Kidman, and I'm out.